All right, so how's it going, guys? We are back, and we're going to look at some more stuff. But first, I want to show you what I did with what we learned in the last video with our padding and our borders. And I kept it really simple, actually. You'll see what I did is I added a border bottom, and I said I want it to be 3 pixels thick. I want it to be solid, and I want it to be this dark green color that we've used in other places. Okay, so we got our color theme going on here. And I also added some padding to the bottom. So now, if you remember, padding goes between the content and the border. So that's actually going to push that border away from the content a little bit. All right, so we're going to look at that, and here's what I get. So I did it to every single paragraph tag. Now, I probably wouldn't leave it like this, but it is a cool demonstration of like, hey, I can see this show up. And I use this little trick here with some padding and borders all the time when I'm styling lists of things. So maybe I have a list of products, or I have a list of, actually I'm building a software product right now here at BizStream, and we had a big list and it all kinds of runs together. So I just put a little border on the bottom, spaced it out, and then you have kind of rows of content that makes it really easy for your eye to kind of break things up and distinguish between them. So that is kind of cool. All right, so we're going to go back over here. Here's where we left off, and we're going to go right in. Well, there was one box model property we didn't talk about in the last video, and that was margin. And the reason is margin has some cool things that you can do with it, and I would like to do them kind of all together. And I didn't want that last video to get too long, because you know how I like to ramble. You've kind of probably figured that out by now. But let's talk about what margin is. It's the transparent area around the box. It separates it from other elements. It creates white space. Now, when we say white space, we don't necessarily mean it's white, right? That just means empty space. Sometimes designers call it negative space. It can be used to horizontally center an element as well, and that's the fun trick that I want to try out. Okay, so we're going to get into that here, but you'll recognize this pattern here is exactly the same as what we did for padding, right? I can say 15 pixels of margin, and that's going to put it on all sides. I can say 10 pixels, 5 pixels, 3 pixels, 5 pixels, and that's going to define each side, top, right, bottom, left, right? Or I can just say, hey, top, or 10 pixels, right? Or I can say margin, 10 pixels, 20 pixels. So 10 on the top and the bottom, 20 pixels on the right and the left. And we can kind of break it up however we need to, right? So we're gonna play with that in here in just a second. What I want to talk to you about is wrappers. So a wrapper element does what it sounds like. It wraps around your content or around big chunks of your site. And it's a really nice way to center content in the screen, especially if the screen width is wider than your content, right? If you're on a mobile device, if you're on your cell phone, you don't have a lot of space there to play with. So usually we bring stuff out really close to the edge already. But when I'm over here on my widescreen monitor, there is some scientific evidence, and I don't know what it is exactly, but we talk about line length sometimes, where it gets really hard to read a line that gets so long your eye starts to lose track of it. So we want to kind of actually limit the width of our site a little bit so it's easier for people to read. It's a little bit more digestible. If you go to pretty much any site, you're going to see that happen. Okay, so let's flip back over to our slide real quick, and we'll see what we're going to do with that. So we're going to say width 100%. That's important because in order for there to be margin, we have to set a width. Even if we're setting it to say, hey, go full width, that's fine. But we're also going to set a max width. Say, all right, so I want you to be 100% of the width of the screen, right? So if you're on a cell phone, your average, like I've got a Pixel 3 XL, I think that's 425 pixels wide, something like that. I want you to take up that full width, right? But if we get to a screen that's really wide, I don't want you to ever go wider than 1200 pixels. Kind of get that, right? So we're setting a limit. Say, go full width, except for, don't go past this limit, this border, this line in the sand, right? And then we're going to do the tricky thing. Margin 0 auto. That auto margin is awesome, all right? And that's going to let us center it right and left, right in the middle of our screen. So remember, when we have two values here, what we're saying I want 0 margin on the top and the bottom, but I want you to calculate the margin automatically on the left and right. Okay? So for this one, I want to actually do it with you, and when we go through this, I want you to follow along. But I also would love for you to pause at the end of this and try it out on yourself on a few spots. All right? But let's try it out together, because it can be a little tricky to try the first time. So let's look at it. All right, so we're gonna go back over here. Let's find our code. And we wanna figure out, first of all, what is it that we want to center, right? What do we want to be right in the middle? So I'm gonna go and look back over at my site, and I'm gonna kind of make some decisions here. I'm gonna say, you know what? This dark green here from the edge to edge looks kind of cool. So I kind of want to leave that. I don't want that to get width limited, but all this text, everything down here is just really hard to look at. It just looks too wide. So maybe I'm gonna wrap everything except for this part right here. So let's go find that in our HTML. And it looks like we already have that. Look, div ID header. That's everything inside that dark green spot, right? Because we styled it that way. And it looks like Shelby's already added div with the class of wrapper. So we wrapped everything else in this wrapper div. All right. So if I got rid of this, I would just have my content in there, right? And you can see also what she's done is add some comments here to kind of tell you what I'm doing. This is our container div or our wrapper div. All right. So we're going to wrap that here. Now we're going to go over to our style file, and we're going to target this CSS class, right? We're going to target wrapper. Now remember how we do that. We'll go down to the bottom. A class starts with a dot, right? An ID starts with our pound sign or our hashtag, but our class starts with a dot. So we're going to say wrapper. And we're going to remember our rules from the slide, which you can refer back to, but I happen to have these ones memorized. So we're going to say width 100%. We're going to say max width 1200 pixels. And I want to say margin. I want 0 margin on the top and the bottom. And I want auto margin on the left and the right. Now let's see what happens, okay? Let's let this reload. And you can see it sucks it in. Right, so this content here is exactly 1200 pixels wide now, because we won't let it get any lighter than that. So if I inspect here and I bring up my dev tools over here and I click on my wrapper, you can see my wrapper here is 1200 pixels. Now this is something I didn't show you in the last video, but it is really helpful when you're developing. Chrome DevTools and most other browsers as well have a little example of the box model built right in, so you can see exactly what's happening with that element, with that box. So I can see I have 0 margin on the top and bottom. I just have those little dashes, and I put auto margin, but it's telling me exactly what it's given it, what it's calculated, 343.5 pixels. Don't need to worry about that, but it's there. And then the blue box here is my content, so you can see it's 1200 pixels wide by, you know, whatever this is, about 1200 pixels tall. So we get almost a square. So that's kind of cool. You can check that out, right? So I want you to try that out. I want you to pick something on your site. It doesn't have to be the whole site or a big chunk like this. It can be just one little element, or it can be the entire site. You don't have to have anything that bleeds all the way to the edge. And I want you to try putting that in the center, right? Limit its width and put it right in the center. All right, so let's go flip over here. All right, so that's actually it for this video. All right, so it's a really short one, but this is a really important concept, and plus the concepts that we're about to get into, they get a little bit trickier as we go along, and it's going to take a little bit more time to explain and kind of demo and play around with. So I want you to try this out. Go ahead and pick some stuff on your site to go ahead and center and use that margin 0 auto trick, along with those other declarations, right? Those other rules that we need to put in there. It doesn't have to be the whole site here, or a giant chunk of content like I have. It can be just one paragraph. It can be just one list. Or it can be the entire site and not leave anything kind of bleed to the edge here, and that's absolutely fine. So go ahead and try that out, and we'll see you here in the next video talking about Flexbox, and we kind of get into more layout stuff, and it gets more exciting. All right, we'll see you guys here in a sec.